Hello, hello, global citizens from around the world. It is Catherine here, your host of Future TV, from possibility to reality, where we are bringing the co-created future that we all want into the present so that you can find out about inspiring change makers like the one we have on today, which I'll tell you about in a second, who are really doing that deep, precious work in society, in their lives, in their families, in their communities, that is the catalyst for us living the future we want in the future now. So I am your host, Catherine Longe, and today we are here with a very, very dear collaborator and friend, and that is Chikere Igbokwe from the UK, who is the founder of Inclucive Limited, as well as the allyship community. And Chikere, I want to just really acknowledge you because we've known each other for maybe 5 or 6 years now in different contexts. And from the moment I met you, I just knew you were a kindred spirit. Like I could just feel that we had the same values, the same passion for equality. And we used to talk about like totally different things than what we're going to talk about today, which is why it's like such a joy for me to introduce you as an anti-racism and inclusive culture ally, consultant, change maker, D&I specialist, and that we get to have this conversation today. So why don't you tell a little bit about our viewers, who you are in your own words, and why you said yes to coming to this conversation today.
Oh my gosh, Catherine, this is incredible and amazing. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for amplifying my voice. And you are so right. I think we really did hit it off, didn't we? Those many years ago, that was like pre-COVID. It was a different world. And I know we always had those kind of really great conversations, right, about everything. And it was just pretty awesome to reconnect. So when you told me about this, how could I refuse? You are my ally and my accomplice. You have always been one to amplify voices. So of course I said, I wanted to come on here. So thank you so very much. And I guess before we start, I guess it's quite important for me to introduce myself to the listeners, which is really, really important, because I think it really is important for them to get to know me and get to know why I do this work. So as you mentioned, my name is Chikere Igbokwe. I'm currently based in London, but I was born in Hampshire. I was born in Southampton. And in terms of my heritage, I always say that I'm a very proud British-born Nigerian Trinidadian. So in terms of my heritage, my mother is from the Caribbean. So she's part of the Windrush generation. So, the generations of Caribbeans that came to the United Kingdom, they were asked to come over after the Second World War. So she came over with my grandmother, and my grandmother worked for our amazing NHS. And then my father, he is West African, he's from Nigeria, and he came over on a scholarship to go to university, met my mother, and the rest is history. Here I am.
Wow.
So I always say, I owe it to this country. Because think about it, how would my Nigerian father have met my West Indian mother? That would have been impossible, right? No way. That would be impossible. So, thank you, Great Britain, for that. And after university, I grew up in quite a small town, Southampton. It's not like London. It's very different now, but it was a very, very small town. It wasn't very diverse when I grew up there. So I always remember being the only person who looked like me at school. But I had a very, very happy childhood. And I think for university, I wanted the big city. So I came to London to go to university, and it was just incredible. It was awesome. It had everyone here. It was busy. It was vibrant. It was exciting. So I decided to stay in London after my degree. And obviously, the way I met you was that after my degree, I fell into recruitment. And I used to recruit very, very senior HR professionals.
I don't think of myself that way, so that's hilarious.
into a number of sectors. And I loved recruitment. I really, really loved it. I think for me, that whole building a community, using my platform to create change. And I remember, so that we're talking about pre-COVID, when we spoke about, when we spoke about diversity, It was really funny because I remember at the time when I did recruitment was full of amazing women, right? Sorry, HR was full of amazing women, right? Just so many women in HR. However, when I would go on a client visit to see an HR director or a chief people officer, very rarely would I see a woman in position of power and influence. And I always questioned that because it was a case of, come on now, HR is full of women. Where are all these women? Okay. And obviously, living in such a big city as London, as you can imagine, it's like, where are all the people who look like me? They were, I never saw any of that. And I think at that time, I, was asking questions, but we're talking about pre-COVID. So especially in the United Kingdom, having the conversation around race, around diversity is something that we were not comfortable having. Okay. So back then, when we spoke about diversity, rightly so, we'll talk about gender. But that was it. We didn't talk about anything else. So there's me, little old Chikere, having the conversation around, race or sexuality. And they're like, no, we're not ready for that now. And I think the change really did come, in 2020, that horrible time. We had, that terrible pandemic. And I was one of those people who used to binge listen to the news and really get scared about everything. And my husband would like, Chikere, that's enough, because it was just horrendous and awful. And then we had the murder of George Floyd, okay? And it was like, we're not going through this again. And it was at that point I decided to use my platform to create change, because I always used to talk about diversity. And as I said to you, people weren't ready to listen. And then all of a sudden I had lots of candidates and clients reaching out to me saying, Chikere, what can we do? So I thought, something? I am going to do something. So it started with the allyship community, which is a safe space for allies to come together and have those really important conversations. And I realized that as allies, myself included, we needed to educate ourselves, right? There's no point saying, I'm an ally if you're not doing anything. So the Allyship Book Club was born. And we meet on a monthly basis. We read a book, we have conversations, and it's a great safe space. And I wanted to do more. It's a case of, okay, what else can I do? We need to have conversations. We need to educate people. So Inclucive was born. And Inclusive is my DEIB consultancy. So the B is obviously stand for belonging. And I, help organizations create inclusive cultures, essentially. So very, very important. I think the job I do is purposeful. I do it because it's so important to me. And because I want to create change. And I guess one of the reasons why I'm on here with you is because I know you are my ally and my accomplice. And I know we are doing this together. We may not finish it in our lifetime, okay? But we're started. And I think this is why it's really, really important for us to come together and have this conversation.
We're going to give it all we got until we hand it over to the next generation, but we're going to really try and get it done with.
Definitely.
Let's start a little bit with the external context and kind of work our way inwards. What in 2024? So waking up at the beginning, it's 2024 now, and it's almost like the conversation around race and ethnicity is like cyclical. So we're kind of on the other phase of the backlash. So it's like there was Black Lives Matter, and then the backlash against Black Lives Matter. Like, what is the current conversation, would you say, in society, and what do we need to be talking about instead? Because I think we probably all agree it's not really working, whatever it is. But what do you see as happening right now, and what do you think needs to shift for the future?
Yeah. So there was a flurry of activity in 2020. There was a scramble. Organizations wanted to have the conversations around everything diversity. So there was work being done. A lot of performative work was done then, but there was work being done. And there's some organizations who've done some really great things. Waking up in 20...
When you say performative, I just want people to understand, you mean like for show, like to look like they're doing
to stuff. Look like, exactly. And there was a lot of that. I think in America, you call it the checkbox exercise. We call it tick box.
Sure.
There was an awful lot of that. We're doing it because, it's the right thing to do, and everyone else is doing it, and our competitors are doing it, and our customers expect us to do it. So there was that flurry of activity. And waking up in 2024, there seems to be some what I call diversity fatigue. Okay, it's almost a case of, the conversation hasn't really moved on. There's still a lot of fear. There's still a lot of organisations still lack that education. And you can imagine that basic education is really important. How do you create change if you're still struggling with the word privilege? If you don't know what an ally means, okay? If you don't know what microaggressions are, if you're still saying it's banter and jokes, how do you create change? So that, that diversity fatigue is settling in and is there. But I think our job is really to ensure that, organizations, drive it forward, okay? Because they owe it to us. They owe it to the next generation, Generation Z, Generation Z. They owe it to their customers. They owe it to their current employees. So I think what we have to do, we have to continue with education, right? So that awareness and education is key, right? And that continued education and action. So we need to see more action. So, what I normally say to organizations, what are you doing? What are you doing to create change? And a lot of them think about, that's a question that really does make them think about what they're doing.
Yeah. I remember a conversation that you and I had late last year where I had just finished up with a big client and we were talking more broadly about diversity, equity, inclusion. And I was sharing with you something that was uncomfortable for me to share, but that you were really gracious about. And I was sharing that of all of the different ways that people are different, my biggest challenge personally was around race and ethnicity. I've never felt like I was very good at having conversations around this type of diversity. And you really generously recommended a book to me. Would you share the book that you recommended and actually what it took for you when you were hearing my disclosure? Like, oh God, I've got to recommend this book to this lady.
Yeah, definitely.
Like for you?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously we knew, we'd known each other. So it wasn't like you were a stranger. And it's a case of, I know that you do the work and you're intentional about doing the work. And I also know that it's not unusual for people to say to me, exactly what you said. A lot of people find having conversations around race is like, oh my gosh, it's a no-go, right? So I understand that. And I think for me, the book I shared with you was a book that I wouldn't share with everybody. Okay. And I think hopefully you've got the book as well. Shall we hold it up together? Okay. Yeah. This is the book. Oops. Can you see it? This is the book. This is the book. This is the book.
Can I say the title? Because it's really important.
Yeah.
The title.
Yeah.
The title of this book is White Women, Everything You Already Know About Your Own Racism and How to Do Better.
Yeah.
It could land as quite a heavy, like it could kind of land like a douche.
Yeah, it is. It is a heavy book, and I wouldn't recommend it to everybody. I only recommend it to the people who I know are further along on their journey. Okay. And as I said to you, talking about race, when we talk about diversity, people like to stick with the safe topics. Okay. Gender, maybe neurodiversity. But when it comes to race, ethnicity, or sexual orientation, people are not ready to have those conversations. And that's why this year I'm doing more anti-racism work, really hoping to get people into that safe community and really, have more conversations around them. But I think this book is really, really important because if you think about it, a lot of white people, white women in particular, are in positions of influence and power, right? And they can really enact change. And as I said to you earlier, if you look at HR, HR's full of amazing women. However, when I talk to a lot of my clients who are HR professionals, they don't know enough around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Okay, how can you drive change? And this is why this book is super, super, super important, right? And I think I would definitely recommend this book for those of you who are further along your journey. How did you find the book, Catherine?
I'm going to give a disclaimer. So I read this book like cover to cover and started it over again and read it with a highlighter.
Phenomenal.
like ladies. So so I'm talking now to white ladies. When you read this book, there's two ways. You're going to have a mixture of these two emotions. So you're going to resist, like there's going to be an element of like, no, that's not me. And then there's going to be an element of, oh my God, that's me. And you're going to fight between these. It's not me. It is me. It's not me. Like that's going to be your whole journey. But I really want to plug Regina and Sahira, and an African American and an Asian American women who wrote this book, because they write very directly, sharing their personal experiences, sharing the experiences of women in their communities who are others, who are the other category. And they do it so straight, but they also do it with love. And in fact, I would distinguish between, you know, one of the challenges that we white women have is that we're too bloody nice. In fact, niceness is killing us and all women. And we're just the ones who are really need to be responsible for perpetuating it. So this isn't a nice book, but it is a kind book, in that it's revealing things that if more of us knew, we could act upon. And if more of us acted upon, we could actually make a difference.
I agree.
So really, Chikere, from the bottom of my heart, like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You've empowered me through this book to go and share it. Like when I share it with other white women, they're like, wait, what, huh? Niceness? How is that killing people? Like, isn't it nice to be nice? No, it's not nice to be nice. It's actually the opposite of nice. It's actually mean to be nice sometimes because it's inauthentic. It's inauthentic, and you're not saying what actually needs to be said.
Definitely.
Thank
you. It's so funny it's so funny you said that, because when we look at diversity, it's all about coming out of your comfort zone, right? And you mentioned it. It's a case of when I say to people, how did you feel when you read this book, right? How did you feel? You know, and you said how you felt. Okay. And diversity, if we really want to create change, we have to feel uncomfortable at times. Okay. We have to question our actions. Okay. We have to be aware. That's what's really, really important. I think not enough people are actually doing that, Catherine. Right. And this is why we need more allies, and we need more allies to become accomplices, because that's the next step, right? We need people to help us dismantle these oppressive systems.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit more about the practical work that you do with your ally communities. And even you've started to introduce some language here, allies becoming accomplices. So, and in fact, this book very much kind of blows the whistle on allyship. Like, are you really being an ally, or are you just kind of cheerleading on the sides?
Definitely. So, as I mentioned to you, Catherine, I love the work that I do. However, it's very, very exhausting. And I find I'm doing the same things, okay, for a lot of the clients. And even some of them are really like big corporate organizations. So I'm doing the same awareness, education, and action. And it's almost a case of every single client I go into, it's almost like I'm starting at the beginning, okay? So, you know, for example, if I'm doing like an allyship workshop or webinar, you know, taking people on a journey, talking about why this conversation is important, obviously setting the scene, creating a safe space, but taking them on the journey, you know, why this conversation is important, what we want to achieve and how we want to achieve it, and then going through bias and talking about privilege, microaggressions, and then the concept of allyship. And it's like, oh, start again. Exactly. Right. Start again. And obviously, I know, saying to people that the hard work starts after my sessions. I think that's what people find really, really difficult. Right. I say to them, this is easy. This is really easy. But once we leave here, that's when the hard work starts. And it's just to see their reaction in their face. And even when I say, you've got to go and educate yourself, that in itself, you know, can trigger some people. Like, Chikere, what are you trying to say? You're trying to say that I'm not educated. You're not educated on this topic that we're talking about, okay? So
it's kind of the difference between intellectual knowledge and like skill or competency that you act from. It's like, it's one thing to know the stuff. It's another thing to behave like you know the stuff.
Exactly. And I think that's the problem. And this is why when we're talking about diversity, people tend to go towards the safe part of just diversity. And if we're looking at more race or anything like that, they don't want to. It's too difficult. And even though in such a diverse city as London, you know, your neighbour could be a person of colour, but how many times have you interacted with your neighbour, your colleague at work? You know, but how many times are you actually interacting? So it's a case of we don't know people, right? So it's finding it really difficult. So a lot of my work is a lot of educational work, unfortunately, or fortunately, um, and having conversations in a safe space, talking about terminology, letting people really figure out their why. When we're talking about privilege, and in particular white privilege, that in itself is triggering. So letting people understand the terminology, right? Right? This is what it means. It doesn't mean you haven't worked hard. It simply means that the color of your skin hasn't been part of your hardship. And letting people realize that some people have it that little bit more difficult because of some aspect of their identity. So really taking people on the journey, right? And really letting them see that allyship is almost like a seed. Okay. So any of the courses that I do, think about it as an allyship seed and think about what you've got to do to make that seed grow into something amazing. And this is what I try and instill in a lot of my participants. You know, this workshop is a seed. And when I leave you, you're going to have to water it and nurture it and feed it. So think about all the things you've got to do. You've got to educate yourself. You've got to, you know, create safe spaces to have those amazing conversations. You know, you will make mistakes along the way. So you've got to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and carry. So just having those conversations with people, let them understand the concept of allyship, and then thinking about what's next. Okay, and as we mentioned, mentioned being an accomplice, dismantling those systems, right? Those oppressive systems. That's the next. That's where we really need to be working towards. So allyship, anti-racism, I do a lot of those. Do lots of listening sessions as well, which is really, really important. Do lots of coaching, right? Employee coaching and also senior leadership coaching as well, which is great. But really trying to ensure that I'm using my platform to create change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, because I know I was making a face, so I know, like the repetitive nature, right? Like educating, another workshop, basic terminology, basic terminology. Can you share an example where you've seen an ally go on a journey, like a particular journey where maybe they were a reluctant ally or they thought they were a good ally and they weren't, but a transformation story of an ally that really inspired you, that maybe we can learn something from?
Yeah, definitely. And I wish I'd brought some examples actually. So it's almost a case of that light bulb moment, right? When we are defining terms, because I think definitions are really, really important. Okay. So for example, if we're defining what bias is, or if we're defining what privilege is, and especially in this country, when we talk about privilege, we talk about immense wealth, right? Okay. And I have a lot of people say to me, especially when we're talking about white privilege, people say things like, oh, well, in China, I don't have white privilege. That comes up an awful lot. And it's like, we're not talking about China, we're talking about the United Kingdom. And, oh, have you heard of colonization? Kind of thing. That comes up an awful lot. It's always a case of, oh, it doesn't happen here. I get a lot of, I've worked really hard to get to where I am. I grew up in a council estate, or I think in America you call it the projects, right? And it's almost a case of really defining these key topics. So saying to them, nobody's saying, or white privilege doesn't say you haven't worked hard. It's simply saying that your skin color hasn't been part of your hardship. And I obviously show videos, and it's that light bulb moment when they actually say to me at the end, oh, that definition, that video you showed us, I don't feel so bad now talking about privilege and white privilege. I really do get it. So it's almost that light bulb moment. Okay, because this is what we want. Because I think the problem, especially in the United Kingdom, what I find, because of certain news channels and publications talking about wokery and wokeness and all the rest of it, it's almost a case of, oh, not another diversity session. What are we doing here? But it's almost like creating that safe space, and having people email me afterwards and saying, Chikere, right, you've really changed my thinking. right? And I'm going to make sure I'm going to create change. So making people feel not so afraid, but making them understand that they've got to do the work, they've got to educate themselves. Otherwise, change will never happen.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what I really find. That's what I find really difficult. As I said, it's just sometimes I'm doing the same thing day in, day out, but I know it's really important work that I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
And I know change will happen. And I think I've just got to look after my own mental well-being as well and make sure that, like in the beginning, I used to do workshops every single day until I was completely burnt out. So now I know not to do a workshop every single day, maybe once or twice a week.
There
Do you
you
know what I
go.
mean? Yeah, there you go. Exactly. So just, making sure that, and creating content as well. I love creating content. So creating content that I can put on social media as well, it's all about empowering. What I say to allies, this is for you. It's all about making sure you feel empowered to use your platform to create change.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
I love that. And on my personal privilege journey, where I'm kind of coming around to, so I know it has a bad name because it has like a stigma to it, because it's like, oh, you were born with something that other people didn't have, therefore you're a bad person. And that's certainly, in historic terms, you can understand. But what if people thought of their privilege like a superpower? Like, you have
Which
this
is,
gift,
yes,
like you can
exactly.
help people, and guess what? Helping
Exactly.
people makes you feel good about yourself. Like, I
Yeah.
really think the whole self-development industry was like catered for white people with white people problems. It's like, if we all just embraced we have privilege and put it to some good use, we'd all feel better. You wouldn't even need the
Totally.
entire industry.
No, I so agree, Catherine. It's about using your privilege to create change and making people understand that we all have privilege. I have privilege. You have privilege. We all have privilege. But how do we use our privilege to create change? Okay. And I think the key thing is when we look at organizations, especially, I'm talking about London, talking about the City of London, and you can do this when you're in London, in the City of London next time. Just walk in the city and just just have a look around you, right? And then you can blatantly see the lack of diversity, right? You don't need any matrix or statistics in front of you. Just looking around, okay? You can see it. When you go into organizations that you're doing the good work for, you see it, okay? There's a blatant lack of representation. So there's no point us doing all this really great work, okay? And this is where the B in the diversity comes in, belonging. If marginalized employees, candidates do not feel like they belong, they're not going to stay, okay? And this is why we've got to do the basic work. Really, really important. And we've got to try and get rid of all those stereotypes we have about huge groups of people, okay? That's another thing, we've got to really try not to have as well, because the stereotypes are there. I mean, when I do a lot of my anti-racism course workshops, it comes out, Catherine, it all comes out. It all comes out, and it's like, whoa. And that's the problem. That's another thing when you do the work. It's almost like I say to people, my radar's up, Catherine, okay? I know too much. And it's almost the case if I can't switch off. So I see bias and microaggressions and racism everywhere I go. I can see it, and that in itself can be quite difficult as well. And this is why, for all of us doing this work, we've got to make sure we're looking after and taking care of our mental well-being as well.
Yeah, and having great, like, I was at a networking event with HR people, some of whom were also diversity, equity, inclusion specialists. And it'd been a long time since I'd just been in a room full of diverse people. I mean, there was diversity in every aspect of diversity, from people and personal characteristics, but also what the work that they were doing. And it had been so long where I'd really felt like, whoa, there's a lot of this. This is home. This is where, the people doing cool stuff that's making a difference. This is where they are, because it can be kind of lonely. So it's also important that we, support each other when there's no one else.
I agree.
There's no one else.
Totally
there's
agree.
just us.
I totally agree. And this is where that whole community comes in, right, Catherine? We need community. And we need to be able to come together, ask questions in a safe space, right? And not be afraid to make mistakes. I always have people say to me, oh, Chikere, I'm scared. And I say, what are you scared of? And it's, I'm scared I'm going to make a mistake. Well, you will.
For
People
sure.
make a mistake. I make
Yeah.
mistakes all the time, and I'm completely immersed in this topic. We're humans, right? Pick yourself
Yeah.
up, dust yourself
Yeah.
off, and carry on. Treat your mistake as a learning moment. That's what I say, but don't be afraid.
Oh, I love that. And final question for you, Chikere. What how can people get in touch with you? Like, how can they follow your work? Like, can they join your
Yes.
community? Like,
Yes,
how do
please.
they
Yes,
talk to you?
please. Yes, please. Um, right. So really active on LinkedIn. So definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. Also email. So email is my first name, Chikere at Inclucive, and Inclusive's got a CIV at the end, .co.uk. Reach out to me. I am an open book and I would love to hear from you, definitely. And I'll be more than happy for you all to join my community. Please do. We need more allies. Being an ally is hard work and we need more of you.
Exactly. So we will share all of the links and instructions on how you can connect with Chikere and her ally community. Just one last time, for the bottom of my heart, like, thank you, thank you, thank you for being you, for doing the work that you do, and for being a sounding board for me, that I can just be vulnerable in front of you, and I know I feel safe and
Oh, thank you.
nurtured. So we'll have to get you back on another time for sure. So
I would love
thanks,
to. Thank you so much.
thanks for today, and we'll see y'all real soon.
Yes, see you soon.